Well, good morning. Good morning and welcome.
Good
I'm Jill
morning.
Martin. I'm Advisory Board Chair, and on behalf of the Diversity Executive Leadership Academy Advisory Board, we welcome you to our first live interview session on the attack of diversity training. As you know, the recent executive orders have left many diversity and inclusion professionals in a state of concern as we scramble to review and resubmit vital diversity training. The DELA Advisory Board wanted to present an opportunity for like-minded individuals and professionals like you to both address these and other issues concerning the current controversy and the use of diversity training as a tool for achieving inclusion and sharing best practices for creating an equitable and belonging environment. We are presenting 3 sessions today, and we have phenomenal experts in the D&I space. These sessions will last approximately 30 minutes, and we will have a few minutes at the end for questions and comments, so feel free to post in the chat. And also I want to let you know that this session is being recorded. You also can attend all 3 and should have received invitations to do so. So with that in mind, we'll get started. Our first interview session will be with Dr. Billy Vaughn, Ph.D. Dr. Vaughn is a senior managing partner with the Diversity Training International, DTU.com. He founded the organization in 1998 to develop cultural diversity expertise through credentialing training. He is the first to offer certified diversity professional credentials. So that's the certified diversity training professional and the certified diversity trainer, to name a few. Diversity Executive Leadership Academy is DTUI.com subsidiary that houses the certification programs, and Dr. Billy is the director. He's also an accomplished consultant, trainer, instructor, designer, and has written extensively on cultural diversity training. His assumption is that diversity training serves as an important educational and skills building tool, but is insufficient alone for developing cultural competence. He has clients across many sectors who have contracted with him for training, organizational assessment, and cultural change since 1986. His interviewer today is Ms. Pamela Fann. She is a certified professional through DTU.com, and we are delighted to have her as our interviewer. She is also director of the Membership and Diversity Integration at Southeast Energy Efficiency Alliance. And so with that, we'll get our first session started. So Pam, please take it away.
Thank you, Jewel. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to this interview, Dr. Vaughn, and thank you so much for joining us, everyone on the call. So Dr. Vaughn, we're gonna go ahead and jump right into some questions that I'm sure not only myself, but everyone's wondering. I know that you're familiar with the Presidential Executive Order regarding diversity training, but what is your understanding of the purpose of this order?
Yes, I'm familiar with the presidential order. And what I gather from that order is that the argument is that the integrity of diversity training is something that we should be concerned about. And from the point of view of the United States government's present administration, there's some question about the use of activities and conversations and exercises that focuses on things like white privilege, unconscious bias, and similar activities and exercises that primarily focus on group differences in a hierarchical way. What I mean by that, and what I gather from that executive order, is that there are exercises and presentations in the trainings that focuses on things that the administration assumes to be very divisive. And one is when you try to make distinctions about people's abilities and people's status, etc., primarily on the basis of their race or gender instead of in terms of merit and things that would suggest that folks have some kind of unfair advantage. From that perspective, the assumption is that we should be a society, and the philosophical underpinnings of our society is one in which there's a meritocracy, there's a level playing field, and everybody has an equal chance to pull themselves up by the bootstraps. And so if there's any types of differences amongst folks in our society, it's really a matter of individual differences rather than group differences. And any type of training that undermines that philosophical perspective for them is training that is inherently divisive. And they actually use Martin Luther King's quote about judging a person by his character rather than the color of his skin as kind of a rationale. So that's my understanding of that particular executive order.
Now that's a great point. So in thinking about that, what do you think are the short and long-term implications of this order for the use of diversity training as a best practice solution?
That's a good question. Notice I didn't take a position on whether the executive order is appropriate or not. I mean, it is what it is. But more important is the impact it has on diversity training. I think that the short-term implication is that we are in an administration that governs the country in a way that this executive order isn't very surprising. At the same time, it was written cleverly in the sense that, they used Martin Luther King's words, and many of the things on the surface of it, you wouldn't actually disagree with it. But the consequence is now there is this in the United States government, they've shut down training. And now it has to go through this litmus test. So everybody who is doing some kind of training that you believe that is affected by this executive order, it has to go through the Office of Personnel Management, and it has to get scrutinized, and then it may or may not get a rubber stamp. And so that's the short-term consequences. We don't know what's going to happen in the next administration, although things appear to be much better. But what I can say is that we are, in the long run, are going to have to think about how we can avoid getting here again, because there's a reason that we got here. And in many ways, we were probably ripe for this type of thing to happen. So for diversity professionals, we have to figure that out.
That's true. And I know you said while you don't have a position, or you hadn't given your position on the order, do you think that there's actually rationale in having this executive order? Does it actually have any merit?
Honestly, I believe that if they were very serious about anything other than trying to undermine this particular type of practice, I think that there are other ways that they could have done it to really show that they were open to diversity training, which they try to allude to, make it so that everybody in the government wouldn't be so afraid, because they're basically saying, we're going to punish you if you continue to do it. So because there are real consequences for folks, and people have kind of stopped and hesitated and trying to figure out what to do now and how to package their training in a way that can pass this litmus test. I think that's where the real challenge is. I'm not certain how sincere it is, because it seems a bit overstepping the boundaries of what it needed to overstep, because they assume that some people need this. At the same time, they are pretending like every piece of diversity effort in the government at this time is problematic.
So That's an excellent point. But so what in this makes diversity training an effective solution?
I've been arguing this for a long time. I probably started writing about this in the late 1990s. Is that especially mandatory training. Nobody in mandatory training really wants. Many people in mandatory diversity training don't really want to be there. They see it as social engineering. And some groups see that more than others. So that's when facilitation becomes extremely important. You got to be very skillful when you are training people under these conditions. And we have lots of examples of where diversity training have gone awry because of poor facilitation skills. And that often happens in mandatory training. And I think that the challenge is for us as professionals and presumed experts at diversity training is to check our own stuff out, number one, and make certain that we are not biased in the sense that we really are trying to use the training to change attitudes. Because one of the things that people learn early on in our certification training is that the research indicates that you cannot change anybody's attitude. And a lot of the participants are very disheartened initially when they hear that, because for them, they're looking for something to really shake people up and to change their minds and to get them on board. What are you going to get them on board to? Your opinion? I'm not certain of that. So we need to look at what the training should be about, but certainly I found that if the training is directly tied to making people do their work better, that's not an issue. It becomes an issue when we start to do blaming, shaming, and complaining. And I'm not saying everybody does that. What I'm saying is that I don't think that we ask the question enough when we're designing and developing and facilitating training we don't ask the question about to what degree are we including exercises and activities that if we did it some other way, we can probably get the same goal. So how do we separate our own stuff around what we're trying to get done to people from being a good facilitator and trying to get people to some type of competency level?
Right. So give us, for us diversity professionals and those who are out here doing this work, in your opinion, what is the future of diversity training in terms of its use and efficacy?
Another good question. I think the future of diversity training really lies in how the profession moves towards providing people with solutions that they see value in. We all know that people need inclusion competence. We all know that we're becoming more and more diverse. We can see evidence of that all around us. What we're not in agreement with is how do we move us from where we are now to where we need to be? And I think that the answer really lies in, first, again, us doing our own work on our own selves so that we're making certain that we're not bringing beliefs and values that are going to be more harmful than useful. But second of all, we have to model how to be inclusive. And that includes things like creating space for voices that are often not heard or are not given space in these kinds of diversity initiatives. When you have an initiative where you're trying to increase the number of females, you're trying to increase the number of people of color or veterans or anything like that, sometimes those initiatives can form an echo chamber where if you don't really follow the thoughts and values and beliefs around it and how it's been laid out and the philosophy behind it, then you're not really aboard. And sometimes those dissenting voices, if they're heard, they can make that initiative much better. So I think it's really all about us as presumed diversity experts being a model for how to create that space where we get as many voices heard as possible so that we can come up with the best approach to training and making certain that people work more effectively together, and as diversity increases in our society, because it's certainly not going away.
Yes. These times, like right now, of course, it's just we're in the U.S. in particular, socially and politically, we're really divided. We don't know if there's going to be an end in sight anytime soon. But the work that we as diversity experts, for us, is to bring people together to promote inclusion. That's the work that we're tasked with doing. What can we do as experts, diversity experts, to resist resistance to diversity training?
Yeah, I like what I refer to as critical thinking exercises that uses self-confrontation techniques. And, there are some people who are going to be naturally ready for, along their own personal growth around being inclusive. They're ready for others to confront them about their beliefs and values, because they're really interested in aligning their beliefs and values with they're walking their talk, so to speak. And then there are others who are far from being there, but yet they're both going to be in the room with you. And then you're going to have some people who are much farther along. So you're going to always have this heterogeneity in your room. And if you speak to one audience, you're going to lose the others. So for me, I don't need an exercise where I make people walk down a row of where people are standing on each side. You have 2 rows of people and there's an aisle down, and so folks walk one at a time, walk through there, and people are spewing epithets at them. The assumption, of course, is that if you experience what oppression is, it's going to be something, that experience is going to help you break through. Well, that's great for the person who sees benefit in that experience. It's not so great for the person who hasn't really bought into the diversity stuff. This is a mandatory class, etc. And they have a tendency not to get a lot out of that. But as an instructor, I can make the whole darn thing voluntary, because people learn a lot from observing people who are going through the exercise. So I don't have to have the assumption that every one of them have to go through that aisle if people feel very uncomfortable with it. In fact, organizations have been sued because they've done that, because the courts have, in some cases, indicated that that was creating a hostile environment for them. And it was for the purpose of education. So I don't know if that's the thing that everybody should be using, but I use a lot of self-confrontation exercises that get people to critically think. And one exercise, for example, that many of the participants in the Diversity Executive Leadership Academy has been exposed to, and that is the one that has to do with unconscious bias. So one is a form that you fill out for 3 different ethnic groups, for different cultural groups, GLBTQ for race and ethnicity, and for gender. And you are just checking off a box about the degree to which you endorse these statements about these groups. Well, that's something that you can control you can manage your impression even of yourself and how you answer those, because you can have glowing responses. But then I have you compare that to doing the same 3 groups with the online implicit bias test. And you see the difference, because the implicit bias test makes you do it under time constraints. So you can't control your answers, and you can't even unconsciously give yourself glowing kinds of responses. You compare these 2 outcomes for the same groups, and you can see the gap between them. And I tell folks after they've done it, I said, don't tell me, unless you want to tell me, what your scores were. You just look at them and for yourself, and for your own professional development, to think about what are the implications for what you've learned in terms of your being able to navigate differences in the workplace. And that turns out to be one of the best exercises. And I can tell you about more, but we're running out of time, and I want to be sensitive to that.
No, thank you, Dr. Billy. So, just as I understand what you're saying, we just have to continue down the path of knowing that we are leading with wanting to do the right thing for our organizations and for other organizations that we work with. So we've got a lot of work ahead of us, it sounds like. And thank you again. I appreciate you taking time today to speak with us on these important topics. And I can turn it over to Jewel. We have about 4 minutes left for any questions.